Thank you. Hi everyone, it's nice to virtually meet you all. I am Jen McDiarmid, the Nutritional Therapist, and here to do the 40 minutes talk all about trying to give you really positive, practical ways that you can try and boost your body up both physically and emotionally at the moment using different nutrition techniques. I am a fully qualified nutritional therapist, and pre-coronavirus would see people on a one-to-one basis and also work with different companies, really trying to help people understand what's going on in their body and really practical, easy things that you can do to really help yourself. So I have crammed in a huge amount of information for the next 40 minutes. There's every chance we probably won't get through it all, but the slides will go on part of the video on YouTube later on, so you will be able to access them when you want to. My details are at the end of the slides too, so if you didn't feel comfortable asking any questions on the group chat today, you're really, really welcome to drop me a call or drop me an email, and I'd be really happy to answer anything on a one-to-one basis. So please feel free to do that, so you know that you've got the support after this talk as well. So before we get going, talking about how we can really boost the body up, I always try to spend a couple of minutes explaining what a really safe approach is when it comes to looking at nutrition and what to put into your body. So if it's okay to pop up the first slide, that would be great. So if we're looking at the world of nutrition, I'm sure you have probably looked at Google, or you've probably heard so many different ways of how to support the body. There's so many different diets that are advocated, so many different people that will say, I don't know whether you should be doing intermittent fasting, or you should be doing the metabolic diet, or you should be doing paleo, or you should be eating carbohydrates. You know, there's a huge amount of information out there. And really what we want to be doing, if it's going to pop onto the next slide, thank you, is to actually really be thinking about what your individual body needs. And your individual body needs are really different from each other. There's some really good foundations about nutrition and healthy eating that we will look at today, but it's really important to try and remember there isn't a single diet that would suit every single person. So instead, hopefully over the course of today, you can start to understand maybe a bit about what's going on in your body and specific ways that you can boost your body up. So you use like what we call the ideal eating plate, but then maybe if you've got lots of stress and your energy is really low, you might think, well, I'm going to really think about my magnesium and B vitamins. Or if somebody's really addicted to sugar, you might be thinking more about boosting up protein and chromium to stabilize your blood sugar levels. So it's trying to be really positive, but also trying to understand what your body says. If it's okay to pop onto the next slide. The way that I try and explain it to everybody is to really start to think about what I call this health line. So in theory, all of us will sit along this line somewhere. So if you looked at, say, person A would be somebody who has got a lifestyle we know isn't very conducive to good health. So they might eat, I don't know, 6 Mars bars for breakfast, have fish and chips at lunch, have a fried takeaway in the evening, drink a bottle of wine. They do no exercise, they have no fresh fruits and vegetables, they're dehydrated. So all the things that we know wouldn't be very good for our body. On the other end, you could have person B who, I don't know, eats only organic produce, has no stress, breathes only pure air, sleeps 12 hours a day, meditates 6 hours a day, you know, all the things that we're told are really, really good for us. And the reality is, when we're looking at supporting your body, is not to think that you've got to be person B, because actually if you try and be person B, you put so much stress and pressure on yourself, it's completely unrealistic to try and be there. So instead, what I'd say today and going forward, and a really good approach to take, is to think, whereabouts you sit now between the whole A-B person, then listen today, do some more research, and maybe take 3 or 4 steps for some people. For other people, it might be taking 7 or 8 steps, so that your body feels really boosted, your mood feels lifted, you've got good sleep patterns, you've got a good energy production, but then you stop before you try and get too close to person B, and it becomes unrealistic, it becomes too stressful, and actually you stop enjoying the food that you're eating. So it's not about trying to be perfect, it's really about trying to think about small changes that you can make long term, and they will be much, much better for you than trying to be person B and it being really unrealistic. So with that in mind, there's a really simple equation to think about, especially right now in terms of boosting up your body. We're obviously quite limited in terms of the produce that we can get, how often we're able to go shopping. You know, people's motivation can start to let down in terms of inspiration for cooking, especially if you're on your own. So a really simple equation to think about is to think about getting more nutrients into your body, so more compounds that are going to boost your body up. Then you're exposed to these things called anti-nutrients. And anti-nutrients are things that are going to start to deplete your body down, especially when we're looking at our mood, if we're looking at our immune system, which is obviously something that we really want to boost up. These anti-nutrients are going to deplete your body. So try and get more nutrients in than you're exposed to anti-nutrients. And on balance, your body's really going to start to thrive. So the next slide just shows you a quick list of these anti-nutrients. We're going to talk about sugar first and foremost, but these are ones, I don't want you to get stressed looking at these list of anti-nutrients, because obviously stress is one of them, but it's just to make you aware that these are the sorts of things that can start to deplete the body back down. So these are the ones to be aware of, and if you can, start to support these and bring these down whilst boosting up your nutrient content. So if we jump away from the slides for a few moments, as I said, sugar is the first thing we're going to talk about. I've been doing these talks for quite a long time now, and there is a current theme that most people tend to have quite a sweet tooth or really, really struggle with their intake of their sugar. Sugar doesn't have just to be sweet produce. It could be any form of white carbohydrate. So if you're looking at white bread, white rice, white pasta, white potatoes, chips, crisps, all of those would also count towards your sugar intake. And if we've got quite a lot of sugar coming into our body, it can really impact your energy, it will really impact your mood, and it will really impact your immune system and just your general feeling of well-being. So I've got a very short little questionnaire that we can go through. If you've got a little device to hand or a pen and paper, what I'm going to do, and it's just for a bit of fun, is just to go through a list of symptoms. And what I want you to do, if you can, is score yourself between 0 and 3. So 0 is if you never experience the symptom that I'm talking about. 1 is if you experience it every now and then. 2 is if it's something that you experience quite often, and 3 if it's something that you have all the time. So, as I say, just mark yourself between 0 and 3 for each of these symptoms. Then at the end of it, if you can add up your score, and then I'll go through in a bit of a fun way what this might mean for your body. So what we're looking at and what we're trying to examine is literally how much stress your body's got, what your blood sugar levels are like, and maybe if you're having too much caffeine or too much sugar to indicate that your blood sugar levels are a little bit all over the place. So the first symptom that we're going to look at is, do you ever experience that you can go off to sleep okay at night, but you find that you wake up in the middle of the night about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning and you're wide awake, mind's racing, you know, like you could just start the day, and you're wide awake for a good couple of hours before you go back off to sleep again. So 0, 1, 2, or 3. Okay, next one, do you crave sweets? So not just sugar, but any sweet produce. Do you find that you crave that during the day? Okay, next one, there's no judgment, by the way. Do you ever have patches of any binge or uncontrollable eating? I always say, you know, you go into the kitchen in the evening to put the kettle on to make a cup of tea, and suddenly you notice you've eaten a whole packet of biscuits and you didn't mean to, but you just couldn't stop yourself doing it. Okay, next one, do you think that compared to other people you've got an excessive appetite? So are you somebody who's always hungry, could always keep eating, and you never really feel full up? Okay, next one, do you crave coffee or sugar in the afternoon? So specifically, you know, after lunchtime, that type of day. And then the next one that links with it is, do you ever find that you feel sleepy in the afternoons? You know, just after you've had lunch, you're sitting back at your desk and you're finding that you could just go back off to sleep before you get a second wind later on in the day. Okay, then the last couple are, this is quite a tricky one. Do you ever notice that you might feel fatigued, but if you eat something, you start to feel better? Okay, so I know that's quite a tricky one. So again, the scorings are 0 if you never experience this. 1 is if it's something that happens occasionally. 2 if it's something that happens quite often. And 3 if it's something that you experience all the time. Okay, then the last couple of questions are, do you ever find that you get a headache if a meal is skipped or delayed? Okay, next one is, do you ever find that you feel irritable before a meal? So when you get hungry, what do they call it? That hungry, angry symptom? Hopefully you've all had your breakfast right now, so you're not experiencing it during the talk. And then the last three questions are, do you ever find that you feel quite shaky before a meal? So when you start to get hungry before your lunch is being cooked, that your body starts to physically feel a bit shaky. And then the last two questions are, do you ever find that you have a frequent thirst? So you're always feeling thirsty. And then the last question is, do you find that you can often need to go for a wee? So you're always needing to go to the toilet. So I hope you managed to catch up with all of those. As I said, score yourself between 0 and 3. Then when you've done that, if you can add up your total score, so all of your 1s, 2s or 3s, and give yourself an overall score for all of those. I'll just give you a couple of minutes. Okay. It's quite difficult when you can't see what everybody's doing, but I'm assuming you are all on track doing that. And as I say, this isn't really, really serious. This is just a bit of fun, just to give you a bit of an indication if your blood sugar and what's going on in your body is something to really think about. So in terms of overall scoring, they grade if your overall score was between 0 and 6, it means it's a low priority, which means your body's doing really well, your blood sugar levels are nice and stable, and you don't have too much caffeine or too much stress going on. They say if you score between 6 and 10, that is what we call a moderate priority, which means it's something where your body's showing indications that maybe your blood sugar levels are slightly out of balance, and it's something to think about addressing. Anything between 10 and 14, they say, is a high priority. So that's something you definitely want to be looking at. And anything above 14 is something we really want to be looking at. But again, there is such simple little things that you can do that really can start to make a big difference. I just saw your message, Caroline, you'll be fine. That can make a really big difference to altering this. So I put a little slide together just to show you what this blood sugar looks like and what it means, and what the difference would look like between you being a low priority and being a high priority. So if I just wait for it to load up. So this little graph would show you a 24-hour cycle of the day. So if we look at the bottom of it, we would say it's from, say, 6 o'clock one morning to 6 o'clock the next morning. And the line on the left-hand side is what your blood sugar levels look like. So if we look at the first line, the blue line, that is what we would call an ideal blood sugar level. So you would get this is if you woke up in the morning and you had some breakfast. So your breakfast would have lots of protein in it, which could be nuts, it could be seeds, it could be eggs, it could be some natural yogurt. You could be having some protein powder in the mix, ground almonds in a smoothie, lots of little tips to boost your protein levels up. A small amount of complex carbohydrate, and hopefully there are lots of veggies if you're having eggs, or lots of berry fruit or apples if you're having some fruit. And what happens is, if you eat in that pattern, you will get a really slow, steady release of energy into your body, which means your blood sugar levels pick up to about halfway. And if you eat in that pattern during the day, your blood sugar levels will stay nice and stable. So you've got a nice release of energy. It will really help stabilize your mood. It's a good indication your body's getting lots of nutrients into it. And then where it drops off at the end, that's where you go off to sleep. So your body has a nice release of energy during the night until the next day when you wake up and your blood sugar levels pick back up again. If anybody scored high priority or above, there's every chance your blood sugar levels actually look a bit more like the red line. So don't be alarmed, it will all be fine. But what happens here is when you're either got too much stress, too much caffeine, or too much of the white refined carbohydrates. When that happens, your body, if it has lots of sugar, it doesn't take long for your body to process this sugar and for the sugar to go into your bloodstream. When that happens, as you can see, you get a lot of energy, so lots of sugar going into your bloodstream really, really quickly. So your blood sugar levels peak up really high. And that's what they call hyperglycemia, where you've got too much sugar going around in your bloodstream. When you're up there, you get a really big surge of energy, you feel really wired, ready to get going, but that's really stressful for the body. So the body releases a hormone called insulin, and insulin's job is to take the sugar out of your bloodstream. So as you can see, when the insulin's released, your blood sugar levels go from being really high to suddenly being rock bottom. So when they're rock bottom, that's when you start to feel irritable, you feel tired, your mood will start to drop, and you'll really start to crave something sugary. When you're down there, your body won't think, oh, I'm going to stand for 45 minutes and watch a pan of brown rice cook. All your body will want is something sugary to pick your blood sugar levels back up. So you can very easily get into this yo-yo effect. If you don't eat much sugar, but you have lots of coffee or caffeine in your diet, especially on an empty stomach, caffeine puts your body in what we call the fight or flight response, which means your body then starts to release stored sugar, and it has exactly the same impact on your blood sugar levels as eating something sugary. So as I said, it's not always thinking about how much sugar you're putting in, but it really looks at your caffeine intake as well. The points that I'll quickly make before we move on to look at the positives of what you can do is, if you have the sleep pattern where you go off to sleep okay, but you find that you're waking up in the middle of the night, it can really be linked down to your blood sugar levels. As you can see with the red line, your blood sugar levels can drop down really quickly. When your blood sugar levels drop down too low when you're asleep, your body will start to release a signal to say, we don't have enough energy to keep us asleep, we need to release some stored sugar. The only way that your body can do that is to give your body a hit of adrenaline to release your stored sugar. But adrenaline is obviously a stress hormone. So if you have a big hit of adrenaline in the middle of the night, you're going to be wide awake, mind racing, worrying about everything, feeling really wired. And it takes on average around 2 hours for this adrenaline to release out of your system. So if you have that sleeping pattern, have a little snack about an hour before you go to bed. Ideally really high in protein, so it could be a really small bowl of porridge with lots of nuts and seeds on it. It could be as simple as a piece of toast with some peanut butter or almond butter. It could be a little smoothie that's got lots of protein powder or ground almonds put into it. And if you do that, what you will do is stop your blood sugar levels dropping too low and help your body go much more of the blue line. And after a couple of weeks, you should really start to find it's improving your sleep pattern at night. So I hope that makes sense. In terms of the sugar and where it goes, obviously our liver is a really, really important organ. It really supports the body, helps the body to get rid of toxins. And if we're thinking about our immune system and keeping our immune system boosted, our liver is a really important organ to have working really well. When we have all these energy highs, all these blood sugar spikes, and the insulin's released, your insulin actually takes sugar to your liver to be stored. And they do estimate, scarily, around 70% of the UK population can have the early stages of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease because of our blood sugar levels and because of the amount of sugar coming in. So if we're thinking about boosting the body up and thinking about looking after our immune system, your blood sugar levels and stabilizing those is also really important. This graph is where they've got all of the low carb eating coming from and the intermittent fasting, and that's all about switching off this insulin response. We don't need to go that far, but the next slide will just give you some really good top tips and really simple things that you can do to start supporting your blood sugar levels. So as I said, don't panic if you are in the high priority. Remember that whole A-B line, and what we'll do is just go through these really practical things. So as I've said already, what we want to do is think about increasing up your protein, especially with snacking. And if you go onto my website, there's a really detailed information sheet all about protein, where you can get it from. So if you're vegan, where you can get really good plant sources from, or if you're eating animal proteins, good places to get it from too. Make sure you're having protein with all of your meals and as part of any snack. It's really easy to forget to maybe grab an apple to snack on. That's fine, but maybe have a handful of nuts at the same time to get that protein in to really stabilize your blood sugar levels. The more of that you have, you'll really find your energy during the day starts to stabilize much better. Cinnamon, so the spice, the brown spice you can buy in most supermarkets, it's got brilliant properties at stabilizing your blood sugar levels and helping your body to stop overproducing insulin. So start to add that to more things that you're eating. So if you were having a yogurt, you could add half a teaspoon of cinnamon to that. If you're having porridge at breakfast, even if you start to make curries and savory food, putting half a teaspoon of cinnamon into that will really start to stabilize these blood sugar levels. And it's a really quick, easy thing that you can do, doesn't cost much money, and it doesn't really take too much thinking about. As I've said before, really start to think about reducing your intake of stimulants, especially coffee. So in an ideal world, I would say no more than 2 cups of coffee a day, and try to make sure you're not having those on an empty stomach. So if you want coffee at breakfast time, try and have your breakfast first with the protein in, and then have the coffee afterwards, and it will really lessen that impact of the red spike that you'll get. If you're going shopping, try and avoid anything that says low fat. Low fat products became really fashionable quite a few years ago. And when we're looking at the low fat products, what they did was they started to take fat out because they started to look at fat thinking fat was something that was really bad for us. But to get the texture and the flavour, they started to ramp up how much sugar were put into products. So generally speaking, if anything says low fat, it generally means quite high in sugar. So you're much better off going for the full fat products and avoiding the sugar, because that really is the thing that's more detrimental to your health. But also, if anybody was looking to lose weight, fat isn't the thing that will make you fat. Sugar and those high blood sugar levels is the thing that does. So really think about reducing your intake of the low fat products. A really good example is if you go to a supermarket, if you buy a packet of marshmallows, which are whipped sugar, they normally have low fat or fat free across the front of them, almost like they're good for us when we all know that they're not. Then the last couple of bits are, if you're buying anything, look at anything that ends in the letters OSE on the ingredients list. Anything ending in the letters OSE is a sugar, and it means it's going to have that same impact on your blood sugar levels as the red chart that we showed. So really think about reducing that down. If anybody's really worried and thought, crumbs, I'm totally addicted to coffee, I've got energy crashes throughout the day, I scored 23 on the chart, there is a supplement that you can get called chromium picolinate. And chromium picolinate is a natural compound, and it's the one that they're trialing at the moment for people with type 2 diabetes to try and reverse it. And it's been shown to really help your cells of your body become more tolerant to insulin and really help your body to reverse those really highs and lows that you can get with the red line. If anybody wants to take a supplement, double check with me or anybody else who's fully qualified to make sure it's safe for you to do so, and there's no contraindications of any health condition you have or any medication that you might be on. The last two, think about your gut health, but we're going to talk about that shortly. And then also try not to get too hungry. If you're really high and low, I wouldn't say go intermittent fasting at the moment. I would say have your snacks prepared, have really good meals prepared, because the second you get too hungry, you're really going to start craving sugar again, and then it will sort of feed back into the red lines up and down. So they are the top tips for beating sugar cravings. And in terms of, we thought about those anti-nutrients to begin with, sugar and looking at what's going on with sugar in terms of stress, in terms of lack of sleep, in terms of internal stress, they are all really big anti-nutrients. So often thinking about your sugar intake can really start to tick off and reduce down our exposure to lots of those anti-nutrients, which are things that we really want to start to improve. I'm fully aware that might feel like a really big challenge for some people, and it might feel like you've got a mountain to climb, but as I said, just do it in small stages. And if you really want to sort of take a step back and think, well, actually, I can't tackle that right now, and you really want to think about something simple and easy that you can do, I would say start to think about how much water you're having and how hydrated your body is. So that's just the next slide. It's just a little visual for you guys. So sugar and those eating patterns, as I say, are quite big changes for some people. But actually, if we want to think about boosting up our body, simply increasing how much water you're drinking can really make quite a profound impact on your body. And it's such a simple thing. one of the hardest things though for some people, because it's so easy to get to the end of the day and you suddenly realize that maybe you've had 2 cups of tea, but you've been caught up on work calls or video conferences and you've just not had time to drink water. In terms of boosting up water intake, it is so essential for your immune system, for your bowel movements, which we will talk about shortly as I feel so comfortable with you all now, but also when we're thinking about your energy, your mood and your mental clarity. Hydrating the body really needs to happen for you to feel bright, for your mood to feel, you know, really good and positive. Sorry, I could just hear my children slamming the door upstairs. My heart just stopped for a second thinking they were coming downstairs. So water intake really supports the body as a whole. In an ideal world, we would be looking at ideally 2 litres of water a day. But if you're starting way back there, don't go from 0 to 2 litres because it might feel quite overwhelming. I would say think about how much water you're having at the moment and try and increase it by maybe 1 or 2 glasses a day. Set a timer on your phone, put a post-it note on your computer, have a bottle of water on your desk or wherever you're working from at the moment as a visual reminder to really try and pick it back up. Ideally, you want to be drinking until your urine is completely clear and odour-free, and that's a really good sign that your body is fully hydrated. Lots of people can say to me, but I'm fine, I just don't feel thirsty, I don't need to drink, and that's not true. Your body's actually got this thing called a thirst mechanism, and your body can almost get used to not having enough water, so it switches off, a bit like a camel, I guess. Not that I'm calling you all camels, but you know, your body can start to get used to not having that water coming in. So what you really want to do is start drinking more water and seeing that thirst mechanism will switch off and your body will start to get used to having that water, and it makes such a big difference. So I would say if you take nothing else away from today, really think about upping your water intake. In terms of what else would work, you know, do herbal teas work? Does green tea count? Does normal tea? Does normal coffee? In an ideal world, I would say water only. Coffee definitely doesn't count for your water intake, and that's something that we really want to reduce. Herbal teas and green teas, absolutely fine to count towards your water intake. And normal black tea would be okay at a push, but ideally, again, you'd be getting it more through water, herbal tea or green teas. So really think about water, really start to hydrate your body, and it will really make a big difference. One of the systems, water, that really, really supports is your bowel health. And when we start to think about bowel movements and we start to think about gut health, it's quite an emerging area of research at the moment. And they're starting to do more and more research into the importance of your gut health. And lots of people are now saying that your guts are actually your second most important organ in the body, next to the liver, because what they do for us isn't simply about getting rid of waste, but actually it's got a whole host of really important health properties. It's okay to pop onto the next slide, thank you. So if we're thinking about our body and boosting up your body, your guts and what's going on with your bowel movements really are such a good indicator about how the body's working. So as I say, it's quite a new area of research at the moment, but the research that's going on is showing that our guts are really responsible for anything from your appetite, your weight and your metabolism, your mood and how depressed or anxious you're feeling. It's a new area of research called the brain-gut axis. And they're starting to look at the communication between the bacteria in your gut and the neurotransmitters that are going on in the brain. And they're starting to demonstrate that actually, if you've got any food intolerances, any IBS, inflammatory bowel disease, or even just a bacterial imbalance in your gut, you're much more likely to start to get feelings of low mood, depression, anxiety, and sleep problems. And actually, when you start to get those, conversely, it can start to alter the bacteria balance of your gut. So if you want to start to really think about picking up your mood, rather than thinking about what's necessarily just going on with your brain, start to think about what's going on with your gut. Have you got regular bowel movements? Have you got any bloating, any extra wind? Do you have lots of antibiotics, or have you got a diet high in stress, high in sugar, low in water intake? Start to then piece together what's going on with your gut health, start to make some improvements, and it can really start to lift your mood, lift how your brain's working, and also start to improve your sleep patterns. The way it improves your sleep patterns just quickly, alongside your blood sugar levels, our guts are where we produce about 70%, 75% of serotonin, which is this feel-good hormone. And serotonin is the precursor to make the hormone melatonin, which is your sleep hormone. So if your bowels aren't working as well as they can do, your serotonin production is going to be slightly lower, which is why you might not feel quite as bright. And if your serotonin levels are a bit lower, it means your melatonin, so your sleep hormone, isn't going to be as high as it can be. Our bodies will artificially try and look for serotonin, and we can get a good intake of serotonin when we start to have lots of sugar and carbohydrates. So often that's why people at nighttime especially can really start to crave sugar, and it's your body's way of saying, I really need the serotonin and the melatonin to help to switch off. So try and get it through gut health, and then you'll probably find that your sugar cravings aren't quite so high. Anybody who feels really sleepy in the afternoon, try and reduce your carbohydrate at lunchtime, because carbohydrate and the sugar releases your serotonin, which means you feel good, but then you get the melatonin hit, which is why you feel sleepy. And that's why people after, Christmas dinner, you eat a huge amount of carbohydrate, you feel really good, and then you've all got to go and sleep it off. So that's just a little side note about how serotonin and melatonin work in terms of gut health. In terms of our immunity, and obviously our immune system will be the last little bit that we'll talk about today, is something that people are really aware of at the moment and really wanting to get their immune system working as well as we can. Obviously, we've got this increased risk of the coronavirus, but even aside from that, boosting up your immune system is really, really key when we start to think about our long-term health and well-being. When we're looking at our immune system actually governs most of our body, and we've got so many different parts of it, from our skin, the saliva in our mouth, how much acid is in our stomach, our white blood cell count. But they have a system in your body called GALT, which is all to do with your lymphatic drainage, and it sits in your gut. And because of that, they actually estimate around 80% of your immunity is governed by what's going on with your gut health. So again, if you're really wanting to get your immune system boosted, really want to get your body as working as well as it can be, really think about your gut health and what you can do to support it. So if you're sitting here thinking, well, great, my bowel movements aren't regular, or, they're a bit too regular, you've got bloating, you've got wind, or you ever get these bouts of IBS, stress tummy, even if you've got things like fungal toenail infection, athlete's foot, feel a bit sick, feel a bit low, feel a bit tired, and if you stand in front of a mirror and poke your tongue out, if you've got any white coating on your tongue, they're all signs that maybe your bowels aren't working as well as they can be. And what you need to do to support it really varies on the individual. So if you're really at one extreme thinking, actually, crumbs, my bowels really aren't working that well, drop me a message, because I'm sure there's not going to be that many other open questions on the forum today about bowel movements. But drop me a message, because often it might be a sign that you need to do a little bit of extra testing, or you might do a little bit of, killing off of any overgrowth of negative bacteria. For anybody who generally just wants to do a bit of maintenance and to really boost it up, I would say boost up your water intake. Make sure you're getting a really good intake of fibre, and ideally you'll be getting that through lots of fruits and vegetables and lots of whole grain products. And then think about trying to get something in that boosts up the positive bacteria levels. So that's when we're looking at either a probiotic supplement, or you can get drinks that you can make yourself at home called kefir. And these probiotics and these kefir drinks and fermented food like sauerkraut all really start to boost up how much of the good bacteria you've got in your gut. And the more good bacteria you've got in your gut, the more your guts are going to work really well, the more they'll boost up your serotonin, your immune system, the more they'll boost up your metabolism, really help you to absorb all these key nutrients that you need, and the better you're going to start to feel. Conversely, things that feed the negative bacteria are stress, sugar, diet low in fibre, being dehydrated, and if you've had lots of antibiotics. So again, think about boosting up gut health, but also reducing things that will feed the negative bacteria. There's two really good books if anybody wants to do some additional reading. One is by a lady called Julia Enders, and she's written a book called Gut, and it is brilliant. She's a scientist, but she's gone looking at the world of poo and bowel movements, and it really explains in so much more detail about what goes on with our gut. It's a really human way, and she even goes down to, you know, the position we should be sitting at when we go to the toilet to have a proper bowel movement, but I won't go through all of that today. And the other book is by a man called Dr. Michael Mosley, and he's done lots of work now looking at the Clever Guts Guide and all about your gut health. And again, it's a brilliant book, goes on, talks about what goes on with our gut health, even talking about in other countries where they're starting to do poo transplants. So if anybody's got any ill health that they can't get rid of, especially any inflammatory conditions, they're starting to transplant healthy poo into people who have got, you know, negative poo bacteria levels. And it's quite an emerging area of research. I really hope nobody's eating right now, but it's starting to show some really promising effects. And I would say in the next 20 to 30 years, I think it's going to be quite a common thing that people would do in order to help people who have got any health conditions that need improving. So as I said, I'm desperately running out of time. I always over talk. But if we move on from this, I've skipped over one of the slides. If we skip through that one and just go on to the immune system, I sort of went over that a bit. But in terms of looking at immunity, I'm really aware, and it's one question that loads of people are asking me at the moment about, what can we do to boost up our body? What can we do to try and help our body if we've got the coronavirus, or if, you know, any other form of ill health? It's really true, the immune system does govern most of your body, and you really want to think about your body as a whole, especially all the extra stress that we've got going on potentially with working from home, homeschooling, you know, businesses, so much going on at the moment. But in terms of top nutrients to support your immune system, this would be sort of my little checklist of what I would think about with trying to also increase your intake of garlic and mushrooms. So vitamin D, sunshine vitamin, if it's safe for you to do so, try and get some sunshine on your skin. We've got some lovely weather at the moment, and it really helps part of the immune system called T killer cells, which are responsible for killing off any viruses that come into the body. It's quite difficult to get through food, but mushrooms are one of the sources you can get it through, especially if you put them on the windowsill for 2 hours before cooking with them. If it's not safe for you to get out in the sunshine, then think about getting a vitamin D supplement. But again, drop me a message or speak to somebody, a healthcare practitioner, to make sure it's safe for you to do so. Vitamin C is probably the one that we've all heard about. Vitamin C is what they call the master antioxidant. So it supports the immune system in so many different ways. They're starting to trial in China. There have been some news reports about people, some hospitals trialing vitamin C for the coronavirus. It's true they're trialing it, but they're trialing it alongside traditional medicine as well, and they're doing it in a very extreme way. So don't try and give yourself mega doses over your RDA vitamin C, but try and boost up your intake either through supplements or through peppers, carrots, papaya. Getting a really good intake of veggies. The reason that they're looking at vitamin C specifically is because vitamin C is very good at supporting any viruses that travel on the mucous membrane in the body. So not necessarily blood viruses, but these mucous membrane. And because the coronavirus is mostly on your respiratory tract, where the mucous membrane is transmitting the virus, that's why vitamin C is so important. With vitamin C, don't wait until you're feeling run down. It takes about 5 days to activate in the body. So really start to get your intake up. Really thinking about eating a rainbow colour of fruits and vegetables is probably the best way to get all these vitamins in, really get your nutrients coming up. And as you can see a bit further down the list, it will get you a really good intake of antioxidants and phytochemicals. So rainbow of colour, and trying to get a really good amount of fruits and veggies in. And then the last two, B6 has been shown to be really important to stimulate your immune system, as have zinc, and really good sources of those two would be coming from nuts and seeds and cold water fish. So trying to get tuna, salmon, all of those into your diet, as well as boosting up your nut and seed intake, is really, really important. Nuts and seeds, again, remember, have a really good amount of protein in too. So by starting to snack on those, if you can, it will be boosting up your immune system as well as boosting up your protein intake for stabilizing your blood sugar levels. So I've been talking for 40 minutes. I'm fully aware that we have covered a huge amount of information. You're probably sitting there thinking, crumbs, where do I even start? There are some more slides on this presentation that I won't try and cram into the next couple of minutes, but will be available on the YouTube video. But what I would say is sort of go back to where we started and go back to remembering that whole A-B person. I've covered a huge amount of information because obviously we're all at different starting points, but just remember, you don't need to come and make all of these changes at once. Instead, try and do maybe 2 or 3, feel really comfortable with those, notice your body getting boosted up, and then think about making some more if you can. Any one step that you make will really support your body, and if it all feels just too overwhelming, simply think about boosting up your water intake and it will make a big difference. As I said at the beginning, my details are on the slide, so if you've got any personal questions you want to check with me, please feel free to get in contact, because that's what I'm here for. Even if it's in a couple of months' time when hopefully things might start getting back to normal again, it's an open invitation to come in and ask me any questions. Did any pop up that you want to go through now?
Wow, Jen, thank you very, very much. You covered an awful lot there, but I know that you've got so much more to share with us. And just to let everybody know, I'm conscious that some people might need to drop off the call. Jen will be coming back to do some more sessions with us. We're just trying to firm up dates and times. If you can keep an eye on the Eventbrite page where you registered for this event, you'll be able to see when Jen pops up for her next sessions. We'll also share on all the various social media platforms. So we will be coming back and talking to you more about nutrition. It's so important. And I think when we were chatting yesterday, I was sharing with you how 5 years ago, I discovered the importance of nutrition and actually the impact that it had. I was in that red you talked about early on, and now I sort of very much sit in the blue line. And for me, it was life-changing, and I've talked lots to my friends about it, but I've never really understood why it was so life-changing. So I think everything that you talked about in your presentation there was really useful to understand the science behind it. So thank you very, very much for sharing that. We have got lots of questions, so please do keep putting them in the chat. If you would like to actually speak to Jen, if you click on the participants button at the bottom of your screen, there's a button on there that you can raise hands. So if you want to speak directly, rather than just pop it in the chat, do press that and I'll come and find you and unmute you. But I can probably just go through some of the questions that we've had now. So I think some of the sort of short, sharp fire questions that we've had, people asking, is tea considered a stimulant alongside coffee?
Not as much. I would say coffee is the main one. It's got so much more caffeine in. Tea, less so, it's still got some in. So I would say, think about your tea intake. If you're drinking 20 cups a day, try and cut it down and have some decaf tea. But on the whole, I would really focus on coffee over tea.
Brilliant. What about a good quality protein powder? Is there anything that you can recommend for anybody who would like to sort of stick those in a shake or in their breakfast bowl or something in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely. My Protein do a really good protein powder, so do Nutri-Advanced. So you can get various ones. Pea protein is one of the most natural ones because it's literally just ground pea that's put into a powder, but it's got quite a savoury taste. So if you're wanting to make a sweet smoothie, I wouldn't put it in there, but it's quite good if you're making, I don't know, say tomato soup and you wanted to boost up your protein intake. If not, then I would be looking at maybe a hemp protein. As I say, My Protein and Nutri-Advanced are some really good ones, and they're vegan ones. They don't really have any, animal isolates in them. So hemp protein or pea protein would be where I would go to. But if you really need to boost up your protein intake, just find one that suits you. And as long as it doesn't have lots of hidden sugars or E numbers in it, then it's just going to be doing your body more good than not having it in there at all.
Can hemp milk be a sort of substitute for hemp protein? Because obviously there's lots of people that want to reduce their dairy intake. Could that be another good way?
Yeah, they often have it fortified. It doesn't have huge amounts in, but it will have some in. But to get the protein powder would be the one that would give you a really good amount. Normally one scoop of, say, a hemp protein powder has got about 24 grams of protein, which is about the equivalent of eating 4 or 5 eggs. So you can see that one little scoop can really boost your protein up in a really big way. So it's not something you've got to have loads of, but maybe just one scoop a day can really get that protein levels boosted.
And the best way to sort of consume those powders is to sort of chuck them in a smoothie or in a breakfast bowl or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Smoothie, breakfast bowl. If you were baking something, there's some recipes on my website where you add protein powder in when you're making like a low sugar flapjack and things like that. So again, then you've got like a little snack that you can eat that's got really high protein in. So yeah, any way you can get it in is great.
Brilliant. I think lots of people experience high anxiety and high stress levels right now because of the enormity of things going on. If there were sort of one or two things that you could really recommend that people do or on a daily basis, because I think there might be some people sitting here thinking, crikey, I've really got to go and change everything, but that's a little bit overwhelming right now. What I mean, water you've talked about, but what would be the sort of really, if you could do one small thing a day and then you could grow and build on it, what would be the things that you would start with or recommend?
Yeah, so before doing anything, absolutely water intake. The next thing that I would do actually would be to try and reduce down coffee intake, because our body, in a very technical way, deals with external stress, so what's going on in the outside world, in exactly the same way it deals with internal stress. And internal stress would be things like irregular blood sugar and coffee. So I would say really try and calm the body by reducing your intake of coffee, boost up your water intake, and then try and boost up your protein intake, because protein will really stabilize blood sugar. And that can be as simple as thinking mid-morning, mid-afternoon, I'm going to have a handful of nuts. It can be really simple little thing: water intake up, coffee intake down, boosting up protein. If anybody's really struggling, I'm not a herbalist, so I'm not registered to really talk about how it specifically works, but there's lots of people that are starting to look at CBD oil, especially when it comes to calming the body, calming the mind. And lots of people and lots of my clients who have gone to Good Body Wellness and Cirencester have really said that it's really helping to support them in sleep. So CBD oil could be something to look at. Or if you're looking at a supplement, there's like ashwagandha, 5-HTP, and again, that is really good at helping to support the mind, calming the mind and calming the internal stress. And when that's calmed down, it can really help the body deal with the external stress that's going on around us at the moment in a much better way.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think that the stress levels are sort of manifesting themselves in lots of different ways. And one of the questions which I think is quite interesting is, as people are trying to regulate between the red line and the blue line, and they are trying to sort of up their protein intake and things like that and reduce their sugar intake, obviously snacking is a big thing. It's something that people will probably snack less if they get their meals right. But in that transition period, it's really tempting just to reach for that kind of that sugary bar or that cracker or whatever it is in the cupboard. What kind of things would you recommend for people who are making that transition and they don't want to reach for something sugary, they really want to try and make that effort? What sort of things would you recommend people could snack on that help support the difference between the red and the blue line?
Yeah, so I would say a little thing to remember is, if your body is looking for those extra sugary carbohydrate snacks, it's because your body's got lots of stress and it wants to release those endorphins and those serotonin. So rather than being able to produce it naturally, it's looking for it to come from an external source, and sugar and white carbohydrate is where your body will be wanting to get it from. So if you try and boost up your gut health, your body's naturally going to start to produce more of the serotonin, and that's going to start to reduce your sugar cravings down. In terms of snacking, I mean, some chocolate is fine, especially if you start to look at things that are over 80% cocoa. The sugar level of those is actually really quite low, so snacking on dark chocolate wouldn't be a problem, and again, having some protein with it. I would say there's lots of recipes. There's a chocolate beetroot brownie that you can make. There's a raspberry and buckwheat slice on my website, and I'm really happy to share those. So they're things that still taste really sweet. You don't just, go from having, I don't know, a dairy milk bar to eating some hummus and carrot sticks, because the reality is you will still crave sugar. So you want to, give yourself body some natural sugar with the protein, and it will really help you move from lots of really high sugar, down to closer towards the bluer line. And there's carb killer bars, which are ones that you can buy that taste quite sweet but are much lower in sugar. And you can get some, shop brought high protein bar like the Naked bars and ones like that, which again, there's no preparation involved, and having some of those in your cupboard will taste sweet, but again will be a middle ground between the blue line and the really high red line.
Just we were talking a little bit about gut health there, and Tracy's asked a question about, are there any other things other than that don't include fermented foods that can actually boost gut health?
Yeah, so when we're looking at gut health, there's two ways to do it. So obviously you can do it by getting the positive bacteria into your gut, and that's where you would come from, like the yogurt, the fermented foods, the probiotics and the kefir. So that's physically putting the good bacteria in. If you can't do that, what you can do is start to have things called prebiotic foods. And prebiotics are things that when we break them down, they feed the good bacteria in the gut. So where sugar feeds the negative bacteria, prebiotic foods feed the positive bacteria. Onions, celery, apple, artichokes, they're really, really good prebiotic foods, which means they would be really good at feeding the good bacteria in the gut. So they would be ones that I'd really look at. All fruits and vegetables do have that element to them. And if you wanted it as a really good boost, you can get a supplement called FOS, which is fructooligosaccharides in a really long way. And that is a prebiotic supplement. So it's a little powder that you mix in with water. And rather than putting the positive bacteria in, it feeds the positive bacteria. Little word warning, when you first start taking that, the positive bacteria will start to produce quite a lot of gas. So for about 3 or 4 days of having that supplement, you become slightly more windy, just while your body adjusts to it. But as we're all isolating, it doesn't really matter, does it? But then after 3 or 4 days, your body would start to adjust to it and that symptom would go. But just don't start it if you're suddenly going out to a meeting or a family gathering in a few months' time, because it might be slightly antisocial.
So the old wives' tale, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. There may actually be some truth in that.
There's something going on there, yes.
Yes, gut bacteria, that's fantastic. I think there's always so much information that's really conflicting in the public eye. There's lots of talk about vegan diets, there's lots of talk about sugar, not sugar. Eat your 5 a day, don't eat your 5 a day because there's too much sugar, and it's really confusing. So I think what you've talked about today has been really, really useful. But if we can maybe just talk about fruit sugars and the myths behind fruit sugars. People say there's more sugar in fruits than there is in a Mars bar, and all these reports then people then become very confused about, well, I shouldn't eat fruits then, but actually I should eat a Mars bar. But then we all know that the reality of eating a Mars bar is probably much worse for you than eating fruit. Can you just talk to us a little bit about the myths surrounding natural sugars, fruit sugars, and kind of what that really does do to the body?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's totally true. There's loads of people that are now totally phobic about eating fruit because they're worried about the amount of sugar in. Fruit does contain sugar, there's no getting away from it, but there's also, different levels of sugar in different fruits. So for example, if we were to look at your berry fruits, they're much lower in sugar, whereas if you were to look at something like, a pineapple or papaya, they're much, much higher in sugar. So there really is a big sliding scale between how much sugar is in different fruits. When we're looking at how much sugar is in fruit, I would say keep fruit in your diet, but I'd have maybe 2 portions of fruit a day. If you were starting to have 6 or 7 portions of fruit, your body would be getting more sugar than maybe we want to. But something you've got to think about is if you're eating the fruit, when you're eating it, the fruit will contain lots of cellulose, lots of fiber, lots of nutrients that your body needs, then your body will understand how to eat it. The problem with sugar in fruit comes more when you start to juice it and make, have shop brought smoothies. So if you were to look at a shop brought smoothie, they can have over 30 portions of fruit in that smoothie. And if you were to try and eat 30 portions of fruit, you wouldn't be able to. So, and when it's smoothied or juiced, you start to lose the fiber and the cellulose. So I always say, if you're making a homemade smoothie, that's fine, because you probably put 2 portions of fruit in. Make sure you've got protein in there to stabilize it, and you're then going to be having all the nutrients you need. But unless it's something you're making yourself, the best rule of thumb when it comes to sugar in fruit is to eat your fruit and don't drink it. So if you eat it, the impact on your blood sugar is going to be much better than if you try and drink it from an external source. I hope that makes sense. Sorry, it's quite a long-winded answer there.
Yeah, no, it's great actually, and I think it's I think most people know the reality that it's good to eat, but it's just being aware of the consumption levels that we should have in the different types of fruit as well. There's a lot of people that have got children at home right now and are home Well, stress is anxiety. You've got yours there, mine somewhere else as well. And would there be sort of any top tips to how to sort of manage either family meals or any sort of, foods that you could, as a family, to keep the stress levels of the children down? Because obviously there's lots of anxiety and stress for the children. They're not used to their normal routine. They're adapted to life at home and not being able to see friends or their usual routines and things like that. So are there any sort of top tips for how you can support your well-being through nutrition in the family environment at home, whether that's feeding the children or yourself, just to try and maintain that kind of anxiety and stress levels?
Yeah. I would really say at the moment, really try and do what you can do. I would say if you try and put too much pressure on yourself at the moment, all it's going to do is add lots of stress. My children, some days will eat vegetables, other days will act like I'm cutting their leg off if I try and get them to eat some carrots. So, it depends what mood they're in. I would say for children as well, remember children's energy and their emotion will respond quite quickly to how much sugar they're having as well. So as much as we get that blood sugar high and low, children will have exactly the same. So I'm not saying don't give them sugar, but maybe try and give them, chocolate or whatever they would be snacking on after a main meal when they've got lots of protein to try and stabilize it, rather than giving them, a chocolate bar mid-morning on an empty stomach where their blood sugars will go up and then they'll crash before lunch. In terms of meals, we're having to cook one meal for all of us, which is what we didn't do before, but otherwise it's just not feasible for me to keep going otherwise. If they won't eat the vegetables of a meal that I know, I end up blitzing their part of the vegetables so that they don't notice it's in there, and then I'll eat it in the whole for myself. So just try and streamline it. Little bits of complex carbohydrates. If they will only eat white rice or white pasta, a really good top tip is to try and cook it and let it cool, because if you let it cool and then reheat it, it really changes the type of sugar to go from being a really blood sugar big spike to being much more stabilized. It's all to do with the amount of starch and how it turns to resistant starch. So don't try and force feed them wholemeal pasta if you know it's a battle that you won't win. Instead, try and cook the pasta the day before, then when you reheat it, it will stabilize their blood sugar levels and you're not having to try and force them into something that they won't have. So small amounts of carbs. Children probably need a bit more. Get lots of protein in, and where you can, get lots of fruits and vegetables in, and just do what you can do right now. And I'm really happy to put together some family friendly recipes and either pop them on my website and give you the link, or to pop them over to you to go with the YouTube video, just to try and give people some ideas about family cooking at the time.
Yes, that's amazing. Thank you very much for sharing that. And again, presumably things like children's squash and things like that presumably have sort of sugars and things like that in. What would be your recommendation around that? I
mean, they do, but it's more important for the children to get the water in. So if they won't drink water unless it's got some squash in, just let them have the squash, because they need to have that hydration. If you can change it and then get, mix of some fresh juice and water rather than squash, which have got more chemicals in, that's great. And if you can get them to drink water, even more the better. But again, just do what you can do at the moment and make sure they're hydrated more than worrying about the squash element.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. I feel like I had a small victory over my children last week. I managed to make them a smoothie with beetroot in it, and they had no idea. And I called it a blood smoothie. I've got 2 boys, and so they're interested in sort of blood and gore and guts and things. And I said, they knew there was no blood in it, but I called it that, and I badged it as that. And I did the last, I put the beetroot in at the beginning, which they didn't see, and then I sort of just was visibly chucking in strawberries and things which I know they like, and sort of blitz that up at the end. So they had no idea, and they drank the whole thing. So I think us parents can get very small wins out there.
Lovely. I tried one with my little boy, and I tried to make him eat some tofu, and I was like, oh no, Pop, it's chicken. And he was eating it going, it doesn't taste like chicken, mummy. This chicken's very soggy. And I think now he just doesn't trust anything. When I put it on his plate, he absolutely knows. Oh, sorry, son. He absolutely knows not to trust mummy with food now.
Oh, brilliant. Well, on that note, thank you very much. I'm conscious that we've run over our hour ever so slightly. So thank you very much for everyone. Do share far and wide about the platform to your friends, colleagues, etc. This is something that we have just set up to keep everybody motivated. So thank you again to Jen. I'm just going to very, very quickly share Jen's contact details for anyone that just wants to take a screenshot or take a picture of those. We will be sharing them. We'll email you all with the presentation and the video link. We'll just edit that today, and then we'll get back to you in the next couple of days. And it will also feature up on YouTube as well. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you again. And thank you again to Jen.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.